Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Gibson. And depending on the sequence of these episodes, this could be a record number of times saying the man, the myth, the legend, Sean Rigsby, because I think the last few guests have been the man, the myth, and the legend. But this time we have the real one. So
The real deal.
it's like having fake Bigfoot sightings and then seeing the actual Bigfoot. I'm kidding. I love all of my guests equally. I'm like a very happy parent watching all of their children play on the playground. So, Sean, thanks so much for joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. I'm sipping on coffee. We're getting ready to talk about our favorite subjects collectively, weightlifting and how to do it. It's great to see you. So thank you for getting me on, making the time so we can chew the fat.
Yeah, I think the reason why I specifically wanted to reach out to you is you're one of the coaches who I see as someone who really prioritizes and values like continual coach development, from the sense of like, if I can do a better job, I would like to be able to do that. And I'll suss out whatever resources I'll need to. I'll find mentors. I'll read as much as I can, consume as much as I can, coach as much as I can, knowing that all of those things really matter. And I think that's really respectable. And I feel like that's been kind of the theme behind your story for a long time now, at least from my vantage point.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad it comes across that way. I think my parents used to say you were an annoying child because not because I was like bad or misbehaved, but because I kept asking why. Like I was inherently curious, like all the time, trying to find the truth, whatever the truth is. Nowadays, the truth has many derivatives, and we won't get into that necessarily. But trying to seek out inherently, like for the best of it. It's like, okay, what is truth? What is real? And being sort of dedicated to that. So that's kind of carried over, I think, into coaching. I remember my first coaching gig. My director of sport performance, it was in a sport performance facility. He like brought me on. It's like day one. Like I haven't earned any respect or anything like that. And he says, "Okay, coach, to me, what are you going to do?" And it's like from that moment, like a switch flipped. It's like, okay, no, I'm now responsible for other people, and they're coming in to work with me, and like how how well I deliver directly impacts their lives. And so that curiosity and that sense of responsibility has, I think, fueled my unending desire to develop myself, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
thank you. I'm glad it looks that way because yeah, man, I'm obsessed.
No, and that totally makes sense. And I'd love to like revisit your background a little bit because I love it. I think your background's great and really reflective of, I don't know if it's so much the time period in weightlifting, but there's like whole travel across the country to get mentored by and work with, a really established, really successful coach or someone who's in weightlifting. I feel like that was a thing that felt kind of trendy. I feel like John North talked about it, Johnny Shankle, Glenn Pendlay, and like there's a ton of traveling around to teams just to find a coach or find someone to get mentored by. And I know you have your own personal story that I would love to dig into. But the one thing I wanted to comment on based on what you said about, asking the hard question of like, well, then what or why, is as a coach, once you start to understand a lot, and this is what we were talking about before we start recording, but once you start to understand a lot, it's like you take that criticality toward your own approach. It's not like you can be ignorant. You're like, oh, we're not making progress. It's someone else's fault. It's, whatever. Here are all the reasons why it's not on me. As a coach, once you start to develop a really robust understanding of like the physiology, the practice, the means, the methods, everything in between, you can say, even if they're not sleeping well, even if their nutrition, whatever, even all these reasons, they could still make progress. And here's probably why. And to kind of draw a parallel, if you go into other like bigger, more hard science domains, you'll often hear people say the smartest people can argue the worst ideas because they're just so darn intelligent. They understand logic, they understand reasoning, they understand critical thinking. So, as a coach, it's kind of the opposite. You can argue why you're not doing the best job you possibly could if someone isn't making and I think that's like a really useful burden to bear, though. And I think it's ultimately what drives you to become the most competent, which is I have a grasp on as much of the literature as I can probably consume. I've mentored under people. I've spent hundreds and thousands of hours in gyms. It's like, okay, I'm probably doing the best I can, even if I still see like holes in my game. I don't know if you would mirror that too, or you would agree with any of that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we want science. Good science is important. Like it gives us our framework for how we perceive the truth. The problem is that there's so damn much of it, right? Especially now. Like it's all. I think it's an exciting time. I would say, not that like exercise physiology and exercise science hasn't existed prior to now, but now I think because of sport and there's actually so much
Mm,
money in sport, there seems to be this renaissance, like where there's new studies that like probably when we started, we were like, man, it'd be really cool to know this. And now it's like every day there's like a new paper, right? To read. So it's kind of endless resources fueled by that money and probably fueled obviously by the internet age that we're living in. There's this more stuff to filter. It's a really difficult process of how to filter that out, what is useful and what you take in and start applying, right?
yeah, I think too, because and this is one thing I've been thinking about. Like, there are so many people who want to communicate that information, and probably for various reasons. Part of it's to be known as the person who has an expertise.
Sure.
Like, I want to be known as the expert. Then I think part of it's to make money. It's just, I'd rather do this. I'd rather like sling this than go work a corporate job. So it's like I'm going to be a content creator, science educator, science communicator, whatever you want to call it. And that is like there's like this evolution by kind of like Darwinian process that ends up playing out where you get so many people who want to do the same thing, the best rise to the top, and then you
Yeah.
get a lot of people who communicate a lot of fucking awesome information really really well. I think I like the Eric Helms and data driven strength guys. Like there's so many people who come to mind as but when I remember getting into weightlifting, you probably can echo this. It's like I was reading Glenn's blogs and trying to talk to Glenn, or I was listening to like the one weightlifting podcast, and I was like trying to piece together approaches and information, and everything seemed revolutionary, everything seemed new, and now you can almost think of it more as like a kind of like a lit review where you're like, okay, here are these 10 really big name people saying the same thing. That's probably right. And that's actually how science works and how you should consume science, like personal opinion on consensus from experts. It's like, oh, here's the general consensus in most things. So we actually all get to benefit from that as coaches because there's such a plethora of information, as you mentioned, that you can boil it down to what do the experts say? Okay. And they're going to give me their sources and I can check those out too. So now you're kind of equipped to be competent.
Yeah, that's such a big important part. You nailed it on the head there at the end. Like, where are the sources, right? Like the people who aren't afraid to be doing that public domain science that are gonna like, hey, here's why I think this. Here's my summary and interpretation of the literature, and like here are the sources, and then like always offering up like, hey, you guys kind of make up your own mind. And you already named off some of the best practitioners. I think that's like a stark contrast from, for lack of a better title, the influencer sphere,
Mm-hmm.
that is creating content simply for the purpose, more the monetary driven thing. And there's nothing wrong with that because I think there is still some value to some of those sources, absolutely. But it isn't it's more about like the driver of the product, the content they produce is about how it is reacted to. Like,
Mm.
what
Yeah.
is it getting engagement? Is it getting likes? Does this increase my income? Even I think coaches who start kind of cut corners and don't necessarily fulfill their own principles and values because like, hey, I'm poor, I got to make a living as a coach, right? So you see that trap happen in a lot of industries. But that method, like, it's very monetary driven, whereas science isn't inherently like we were talking about, like this desire to want to know the truth,
Yeah.
to question, to find why, to speak with our peers and like kind of come to that consensus and determine like, okay, we feel really good about this. We got multiple people coming up on it. I don't see that happening in that sphere of knowledge. So we're kind of these sides are like combating with each other, and even kind of intertwining a little bit. You'll see
Yeah.
people, I don't want to say masquerading, but um, stepping in as like this subject matter expert, pretending that there's hard science, making TikTok reels, and it's like, oh, sweet, okay, good, yeah, that sounds good to me, and it's based off like one study that, you dig in, you look at the methods, and you're like, no, absolutely not. Like none of this was set up right. Like, of course, yeah, you took swimmers and said it applied to elite weightlifting before, or
Mm,
something ridiculous
yeah.
like that, right? So
No, those are all great points. And I saw this like really interesting thing from Scott Barry Kaufman, who was on the podcast, and he mentioned this idea of person, some aspect of personality, and who is most likely to be an influencer. And it's like, oh, so if you want to be an influencer in the future, if you have these personality dispositions, like maybe it's best suited for you. And I thought about that, like, oh, people are seriously pursuing that like role as an influencer to make money. I was like, that's so fascinating to me. And I guess it's just one step from being a science communicator. I mean, realistically, like I think science communicators are people who are the most interested, and then they have the skill set of like journalism and communication. And then you kind of walk down and you walk away from like the informed path, and you just get to someone who like peacocks the lifestyle that you want, and that's what an influencer is, like, to some extent.
yeah, yeah, no, that's a important distinction.
Yeah.
There's an Ashton Hall, I guess that's his name, right? The
I have
guy who,
no clue.
I think he's the guy with the bottles of water that does the face thing. So there's those people who are like, they're broadcasting vibes about
Yeah,
their life.
totally.
And then that is far removed from people like, I don't know, a good science educator in my sphere is a woman named Jo Club. She's
Okay.
a sports
Yeah.
scientist.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might be familiar with her work, but that's a science educator. That's also somebody. So I think it's important more than ever. I could rant on this forever, so I'm gonna try to keep it short.
You're good.
To have training from critical reasoning, critical thinking. That's why like we need philosophy now more than ever. We need literature now more than ever, because
Wow.
we need to be able to read and interpret, right?
Yeah.
Those skills are important. So you can go, it's like, okay, this source is probably valid. They've done a lot of work. You could dive into that paper yourself, but even just having character judgment where you'd be like, okay, Joe Clubb is a sports scientist who worked for the Buffalo Sabres, the Buffalo Bills, like walk the walk, talk the talk for a number of years, has shown me what her work looks like,
Wow.
and so like, that's shown us, the public domain, not me
Yeah.
specifically, but we can go like, yeah, this is somebody I should probably listen to when they speak, right? Like the body of work is such a huge part of it.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. I didn't expect for the conversation to kind of start like this, but I think it's a great
Yeah,
way
sorry.
to introduce. I think it's a great way to introduce a bit more of like the fourth dimension, if you want to call it that, with coaching, because I feel like you get so caught up in. It really is easy to get caught up in like, here's a technical model, here's a like all the things about programming, all the science, blah blah blah, and it's like, okay, well, how do you actually get to that stuff, and then how do you use it, and then how do you move from it, and I think there's just a lot of stuff in between that has to happen, from like understanding technique and programming to doing that well, and not being led astray. But it's to rewind a bit, I mentioned you kind of covering your background a bit and saying a bit more about your journey this time as a weightlifting coach, and maybe connecting the dots of, have you always been this kind of like rationally driven and interested in kind of the more like evidence-based reasoning side of coaching, or has it been like, oh, I found at some point that was the best way to go, because just relying on intuition or these like stock methods, it just like, it kind of runs out pretty fast, it doesn't really lead you to like long-term development.
That's a good question. I hate to like punt it and not directly answer, but the one is, to give it depends, but my answer really is both. Uh, when we were starting, there was a lot less stuff to read.
Mm,
So you were reading things like Glenn Pendlay's blog. We could talk to the old heads about how they were reading, like muscle and fitness magazines and collecting those, because like that's where the knowledge was, right? And so the only other thing you could do really at the time, honestly, was read the translated Soviet texts. You could read textbooks. You could, grab super training or whatever you want to talk about, like those things. But if you want a weightlifting specific, you'd get the Soviet texts and then just learn. And so I think there's a reason that degree programs to this day, the pedagogy of it is like still having an internship. I don't know like an exercise science degree that exists without an internship piece, even at the bachelor's level. Like to my knowledge, I don't think there is one. And so right now, I mean, you're in the middle of your PhD candidacy and you're doing it, man. Like you're out there getting the experience. It's really important, right? And you had to get so good at that to even get that far. So I remember seeking out truth, reading these texts, kind of going into my laboratory that was my friend's like garage gym, and we had the tools and like, it's like, okay, well, I read about this method for improving strength or power. Let's try it out today. And so you begin experimenting on yourself. Like, I think that's really, really important. I think we have to be training because before you start getting irresponsible, applying your methods to other people, like you got to have some grasp of it on yourself, right? So really important to be a practitioner in your own right. But then it's like, okay, I'm getting the hang of this. I can maybe start helping people out with like really low consequences. But shortly after reading those things, man, yeah, I went and found Glenn Pendlay. It helped that we were in that period, like that old Cal Strength period, the golden era, so to speak. It helped that I lived in California. It helped that, they were doing streams and things like that. And it was pretty accessible. I lived in a time where, you could go and you could find something. And I drove up and just sought out that mentorship as much as possible. And I think the first day I met Glenn, I took him out to Chipotle. I love telling the story. I don't know if I told it last time, but he's like, "Oh, I got to teach you about the quesarito. Do you know what a quesarito is, Sean?" And it's like, "No, Glenn, I don't. It's where they make a quesadilla, make a burrito, blah, blah, blah." But, having those moments of exposure where you as a stupid, fresh novice are just throwing all of those noise questions because we're being exposed to all these new thoughts new to us for the first time, and having someone who's seasoned and has like done the years of it and is also has, scientific training, has a master's degree, has done, a study and things like that to just be like, oh yeah, help you along. They're like, oh, that's not really important because of this, and that was the thing. He always followed it up with the reasoning behind it or with his experience, so he was aware of those concepts. So it gave me a really good model of like, hey, be aware of these things. Don't completely dismiss the science. But, really consider it and think about it. I think about it this day. I was having a conversation earlier this week about velocity-based training. And before I started using it in my own coaching practice, we basically just collected data for 6 months. And that was it. And like, that's kind of my, I think, approach to almost all new methods. If they are safe to fail, which means they're not going to damage the athlete's progress or program or be injurious, great. That checks that box. And then I'll just sit there and kind of watch what happens before you can start thinking like, okay, yeah, this will work. So that's 2 parts. That's the evidence-based piece. It says, hey, VBT appears to be helpful, blah, blah, blah. And then me, the practitioner, applying it to the athlete, speaking with them, see how they feel about it. Do they actually like doing this? And parsing through the data that we're collecting. And it's like, okay, is this a valid means or not? But I attribute seeking out what little information there was and like having a great mentor like Glenn in that era to be like, yeah, this is kind of how you do things. So I got really lucky.
Yeah. Was that something that kind of, I don't know, when did you start your own coaching practice, like formally having a team, having athletes? Was it kind of in the time of like working with Glenn and learning about it? I know, because I know you were at Muscle Driver, so I don't know if you were coaching at all then, like what the overlap would have been with coaching and competing.
Yeah, I honestly, from the start, at least in my weightlifting career, like I was a coach on day one because I was trying to be a strength and conditioning coach.
Gotcha.
So I was, looking to be in sport performance, and I worked in that environment. I got exposed to a lot of training, through CrossFit because CrossFit was the big wave. I was like a rugby athlete who tried out this CrossFit workout with weight training, actual strength training. And I was like, oh, I want to learn more about this. I think this is I think I like this. And I'd been coaching in some form or another since I was 13. Like I was coaching hockey. I was coaching younger people in hockey. And then I was coaching people in rugby because that was my sport. And then I was coaching people in CrossFit. And then I was, so it's just kind of been like, I've always coached when I think about it. I have felt that my skill set is to help educate others. And in this case, it's physical education, teaching them how to do these things. So yeah, was I necessarily qualified, like to my standards now looking back? Like, should I have been allowed to be, because I have really high standards like yourself on like what I think this profession should be and can be. But you do got to start somewhere. At least it was the least amount of damage being done, I think, in the period when I began, helping other weightlifters try to learn how to weightlift. So that was Heavy Metal Barbell as a club started in 2011. So that I would say is the beginning of when I started, helping people learn how to weightlift.
Yeah. And what did that look like from a coach development standpoint on your end? Obviously, you were competing, you were training, you were being coached, so you're getting like that input. Do you remember much of like your coach development journey as as akin to your athletic journey of like the equivalent of a 100 kilo snatch, 120 kilo clean and jerk, or 140 kilo snatch, or 170 kilo clean and jerk? Do you remember kind of like your development and how it felt like your competence was kind of coming along as you stayed in the sport?
Yeah. So it started again with those texts, honestly, because I looked at like, okay, where's the knowledge? And then I even looked up, okay, well, I'm not currently enrolled in a traditional exercise science program. What are the books that they've got to read? So I got an anatomy book, a physiology book. I got a physics book because I couldn't really source like a biomechanics book, and I think it would have been beyond me, honestly, at the time. So like I got those and I read them on my own. And I'm not saying that maybe I would have passed physics with an A or anything at the time, but understanding those concepts, like it was the first time that I cared about the science because I could see it applied. I was like, okay, I really understand like how these mechanics are affecting my physical world and the task I'm trying to accomplish. So, having that direct connection to the thing that I cared about was really, really helpful. It made digesting difficult concepts actually really easy because I had a really solid why. So that's kind of the method I took. I literally like searched for, like a syllabus or a program of study that you would get for like a bachelor's or a master's. It's like, okay, so I think maybe the first textbook I bought, I'm looking at it right over there. It's Science and Practice of Strength Training, of course. It's like, okay, like this is what you should do. So I just read a textbook, right? So that I would say it's there, and then be like, okay, well, if you got to train people, you got to be certified. So continuing to search out certifications. I think early on, because we were operating like I was with a business partner, and we were like trying to open a CrossFit. In addition to going to this weightlifting route, I got a CrossFit certification. I got my Glenn taught my USAW, level 1 in curriculum that's now much older than the current format and much poorer, I'll say. I think the curriculum that is now taught is outstanding. If people want a great place to start to understand weightlifting and how to coach it. Eventually that went into a CSCS many years later, but that was the beginning: reading, digesting, doing, getting certifications, and then that mentorship piece was the biggest part, like having a coach me. I think there's something about going through the process and having this sounds like Cobra Kai or like something martial arts, but like having like a lineage of coaches, I think is really, really valuable. I saw a coach relatively recently who's tremendously successful, but lacking in some like areas that I would consider very fundamental, very basic. Okay, and just knowledge, and it's not like scientific knowledge, anything like that. It's just like this kind of, I don't know, basic weightlifting knowledge, because I got spoiled and I've been coached by 5 senior international coaches. So having that relationship with them, being an athlete, and being prodded along, that for me was the majority of the rest of the development, because you can always get information and discern it and cycle through it. It's always going to be there, but there's only so much time in your life in a period where you can endure being really, really poor and just trying to learn from somebody, or intern somewhere and do that work. So I really recommend not skipping that step, because I think it's so vital. So if I were to put the check marks on it, it's like, yeah, read, digest, research what a professional would be doing in their development. If you're not going the route like I did, like started that way, get certifications and get exposed to a lot of different information. I thought I was going to be a strength coach, so the step one was field work. learning how to like sprint, change direction, agility. I had a great mentor for that, a sports performance director who learned from like Lauren Seagrave, who's a famous track coach, all that kind of stuff. Awesome. So the next thing on my list was, okay, I'm getting this down. I'm getting these fundamentals down. I got to learn how to weightlift. Let me go. Who's the king of that right now? And it's this guy named Glenn Pendlay. He lives 5 hours away. So, that kind of ended that journey. I was like, nope, I'm only about weightlifting now. Like that's my whole life. It's my whole personality. Tails all this time. So, we just went down that road. I was now obsessed with acquiring as much knowledge about that endeavor as possible, obviously. So, the trope you kind of mentioned, the cross country travel, learn from coaches. I actually think it's really important. I think if you can afford to spend time, even if it's like a month, to just go be with somebody and see how they do things, I think it's really, really valuable.
Yeah, that was fantastic. There's so much great information there, and I feel like I learned so much more about you and your coaching journey and what your mindset was like when you started, and how that's what feels like the same as it is now, which is kind of growth oriented and this constant pursuit of I know better, therefore I should be able to do better. And I would like to be able to do that for the people that I then work with and coach and able to support. Breaking those stages down just a little bit more. So I think the people who listen to the podcast, it always surprises me because they're like the most respected, developed people in the profession, and then you probably get people all the way down the chain where it's like the people who do the research, the people who have coached the champions, the people who are coaching people who will be champions, the people who are coaching people, and the people who are getting coached by people, and then the people who are like, oh, what's this weightlifting thing? So we kind of touch all the bases, which is awesome. And I would say rehashing what you mentioned of start from, learning the foundational kind of knowledge that supports the decisions we make. So when someone says, so I had breakfast with the football coach at the high school that I work at this morning, and he was like, could you kind of explain the rationale between like how you develop the squat, bench, and clean? And I was like, yeah. And it kind of starts as a funnel, and you kind of work from this to that, and you develop muscle and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, a good foundational understanding of how periodization works as it plays out of general to specific means, more kind of like global changes to specific changes, and all the things that kind of fit in there. From your experience developing as a coach, what were some of the resources that allowed you to do that most effectively? And I think you mentioned, a few different textbooks, you mentioned different certifications, but I was, I can see through this pretty easily. I can kind of lift up the veil. When I see a list of certifications, I kind of look at like NSCA or any like, well-recognized strength and conditioning association. The rest are like, you kind of take them or leave them. And then it's the same with like information. It's, if someone's reading Brad Schoenfeld's hypertrophy textbooks, like that's a pretty good resource. Like that's a really solid resource.
Yeah.
If you're reading like some basic physiology, like that's a good resource. But if you're reading, something that has to do with being primal and not eating processed foods, and it's like, that's just some bullshit. And that's like bias. That's bias in a book. So from your experience, what were the best resources you found? And then maybe along with the mentorship that you had, we'll kind of explore this, but like what you pulled from like Glenn and all the mentors you had too.
Hilarious. So one of the most practical ones, and this is why it's named that, books was Practical Programming, which, is, it now only says Mark Ripto and Lon Kilgore, but Glenn Pendlay actually wrote a portion of that text. If you've seen the first editions, you'll see his name on it. They had a falling out. It was later removed. I don't know to the degree to which he authored those things, but I read it, and what it helped is because it had super, super basic global levels of chapters on physiology. Like muscle physiology is like, basic stuff. Like here's your type 1 fiber and type 2 fiber, and like here's myofibular hypertrophy and things like that. But those concepts were really important. They were an introduction, and then so next was, okay, get the anatomy physiology textbook, which kind of expands on this, and that one might be let's say a more medical emphasis. But yeah, having those basic scientific primers. So like I mentioned, like getting that and getting a physics book, and just like, okay, like, yeah, this is inarguable. Like these are texts that we're teaching in a variety of domains. It's not
Yeah.
just sport. Like that anatomy physiology book is teaching nurses,
Yeah.
how to do their profession. It might be something that they is in pre-med for an actual doctor, so like okay, this is very grounded and rooted in the best traditions of scientific rigor. Like that's why books are important, because you
Yeah.
can't just publish a book. It doesn't,
Yeah.
well, people can, but you can't just publish a textbook, right? So I think starting there and getting like I do think it's important to have fundamental understanding. Like I don't think that necessarily a person needs to know the exact mechanisms of like myosin, actin, titin, bioglobin, like and like continue to go down that road. Like, okay, that's probably not as important. You don't need to be like an Andy Galpin level
Yeah.
physiologist, right? To do that. But yeah, if you don't have that, if you don't have like Hansel, like if you don't have these very general understandings, like you just don't know how anything works. So I think so starting there, and then I'll go back to like honestly going into my lab and like it's like, okay, like yeah, I do get stronger when I do things that should make me stronger, right? Like I could even see like my body was changing, because when you're a novice, it's really, I think, really easy to make those observations. If you're training consistently as a novice and you're untrained, like you'll actually see some, even if you're not like a amazing responder, you'll see yourself jump higher, run faster, be able to lift more weight, and continually get more muscular. So it's almost that like immediate validation of those scientific things. So as long as you're sourcing it, what we're trying to get at is like, where do we source truth, and like so books
Yeah.
are great. Books are a great start. Books from reputable sources are great. Schoenfeld is like the authority essentially on hypertrophy today. Well, why is that? It's because his body of work
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
decades
Yeah.
has been submitted to rigor, and like all of our peers are saying like, yeah, this is applicable.
Yeah.
Do I think that if you read the text that you're prepared to teach somebody to get as muscular as possible? No, I don't think
Yeah.
that, but you at least have an understanding so you can read the text and start doing a little bit. And maybe if you're training, that's the next step is like, okay, where do I go follow someone around, like how to do this? Like how is this done in practice? In a session, in over weeks designing a program. Like I think the most important thing is to be able to coach a session,
Yeah.
right? Like that's where we all got to start.
Yeah.
Even maybe before you write the workout, like, hey, can I do this? What I'm doing with you right now, look you in the eye, talk to you, communicate with you, present and project, gain your trust and confidence. And then we'll go and do the exercises. Because honestly, most of the people you're going to coach, it can almost not matter what you're doing. Like the vast majority, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
let's just go use some sound, basic, old school stuff, and it's going to work. And then you can start getting more refined from there. So I think that's, I guess, step one.
Yeah, no, I love that. And so what you just said, the way I interpret it and the way I would frame it is you as a coach or someone who wants to become a professional, you should be able to read research articles about topics that are relevant. You should be able to read books, read articles, non-peer reviewed, listen to podcasts, and you should not need background knowledge. Like you should not have to go suss out background
Yes,
knowledge. So you should be
that's
in a place where, because if you read a research paper, there's always the introduction, which is like quick, cursory understanding of like, what are we going to talk about? Here's how the topic is developed. Whether that's like, well, the Olympic Games were in the 776 BCE and it changed like this. And now we are modern day sport. And this is why performance is important. And this is why we're going to talk about what we studied. And it's like, okay, I get that. And with hypertrophy, it's the same idea. But at some point, you have to assume that you don't need the like skeletal muscle is a plastic organ that is responsible for movement and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we're already up to speed. And I think that when we talk about like professionalizing a field, that's what we talk about. It's having this established, rigorous, like base understanding everybody has. And then we can specialize and specialize and specialize and then ask better and better questions and then get better and better answers to those questions that allow us to continue to move the field forward.
that was terrific framing. Absolutely. If you don't have the base understanding, that background info, none of this stuff's going to matter. Like,
Yeah.
just being like, okay, VBT good. Like, okay, all right. Well, why?
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
is that all you're going to get out of this? Like, you're never going to really refine it, and understand it. And you got to know how to use your tools. So if you don't have that background understanding, so yeah, I think that's exactly hit the nail on the head. The reason that I currently have the ability to parse through information and see it critically is because I have the textbook knowledge, and
Yeah.
it's very, very helpful. And then if you do get a mentor who's like, okay, yeah, like this probably doesn't matter, this doesn't matter, that's based on decades of their
Mm,
experience.
yeah.
Okay, that's kind of cool too. Who
Yeah.
also always says, make up your own mind, do this
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah.
but gives you. It's important to have a skeptical lens, like that
Mm,
very critical lens, and be like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna wait until I've really investigated this myself over a period of time, to start believing in that thing.
yeah.
So
Well, and there's this book by Robert Sapolsky called Determined, and he talks. There's a chapter, and it's like turtles all the way down. But I think he's thinking of like this reductio. Anyways, um, I think there's nuance all the way down. And what I mean by that is like I'll see terms like explosive strength, and I'm like, what does that mean? And I just assume I know what it means. And then I've actually been reading papers recently for something I'm writing, and explosive strength is defined, and I'm like, now I actually know what it is. And you realize that like those mentors you would have, the people who are like the communicators at the top, everything they talk about and pass down, there's nuance through all of it.
mhm.
And there are decades and decades and decades and decades of nuance, and it's like build the foundational knowledge and understanding to be able to function consistently. I think that's probably the best thing, is like function consistently and repeatably. It's like
Yeah,
I know if I do something, this is generally the effect. And then you can start to kind of like chip away at the nuance, which is everywhere. There's always nuance. And even when we talk science, and I think this is why, having some sort of like not formal training, but just an understanding of what the scientific method is, it allows you to say like, oh, it isn't this, handed down on high perfect process. There are a lot of considerations that need to be made, whether it's with like the process of submitting like an IRB, or thinking about like a study protocol, or where the funding's coming from, or the grant that you have
yeah,
to write. It's like, okay, so there are a lot of layers that just get you to even studying something to begin with. And then it's like, okay, well, what's all the background work for a topic that informs what are relevant questions to ask now? Because you're not going to do the same thing that's been done a trillion times if it's shown the same result. It's like, okay, so you have to ask a new question or a novel question. It's got to be, it's got to fit within these constraints of an academic calendar or a semester, or
yeah,
a subject pool, and what's the sampling method. And it's like, okay, there's a lot of nuance that goes into all this, and it's not that people need to know it, but you should be aware that it's not. I like to think that it's like not so straightforward as it comes across, which is, oh, this is good, it's studied, an expert told me, therefore it's true. And it's like, that's just wrong, because a lot of people say a lot of bullshit. And I could bring up topics that would probably ruffle too many feathers, which I won't. But there's just a lot of bullshit that's believed because cultural reasons, or it's the like overwhelming ideology, or it's like, okay, so there's a lot of like, as a person taking on the responsibility of burdening, understanding the process, understanding the information, and being able to work through it.
yeah. The feelings seem to be dictating the information, or
Totally. Yeah.
someone's feelings or beliefs about a certain thing, and that's outside strength conditioning, as you were kind of alluding to. So I guess I'm going to ask you, how do you think we keep people's feelings out of it? I feel like we're simpatico in that, like we're like, I just want to know the truth. Like I just want
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Totally.
Actually, Travis Match said that to me once. He's like, you know what I like about you? He's like, even if you end up being wrong, like you accept the truth. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah. It was like I got what I needed. Like that's fine. And now I'm not doing wrong things anymore. That's great. Like that should be the point of science. How much science do we do is really just like proving a thing we
Yeah.
were hoping to be correct is incorrect, so that
Yeah.
we're not wasting time anymore. So yeah, how do you think I'm going to ask you a
Yeah.
question now.
Sure.
How do you think
Yeah.
we manage the believy part of stuff and leave feelings at the door? Can we help people see see the light,
Sure.
Josh, and see the reason?
Yeah. You know, I think so. I have like this insatiable curiosity that is kind of like um really attracted to like philosophy and psychology, and I think those are really useful because you realize quickly that you are not someone's criticism. So if like someone tells you
Mhm.
like this is how I experience you, it's like okay, that's like really helpful to know that I come off that way. I don't identify as that thing though. I don't identify like you're an asshole. It's like I'm not an asshole. I did something that could come off like that and
Sure.
be perceived as that, but I'm like inherently not an asshole. Like
Right.
this incredibly black and white thinking. So you kind of pin down, it's like, okay, I'm not someone's criticism. I do things that could be, more or less appreciative or someone could more or less appreciate. It's like, okay, so I can change my behavior to do things that I think are more in alignment with like what people would want or what they would appreciate or what they could benefit from. Just like as a coach, it's like someone didn't make progress. I'm not a bad coach. It's like that string of decisions were kind of shit from the start. I should do a much better job than that. So it's like, okay, how can I then approach it better? It's like in a more informed way. It's like hopefully I have some information from that failed experiment. I can apply it to the next one. So it's not identifying as someone's external criticisms or my own internal feelings or criticisms. I feel this way, therefore that's who I am. It's like, no, no, feelings are this just like, and you could get off into a whole evolutionary whatever, but like feelings just something I experience. I don't have to attach myself to it. So you have to, from my perspective, your question is how do you remove that like personal attachment to
Mm.
an ideology or belief? It's to realize you aren't that thing. I think is separate from you. And then you can try to understand it. You can try and develop a more like rational, critical perspective of it. And then you can one say, okay, like it actually doesn't make sense. I don't need to associate myself with it. So I'll choose a more rational route. Um, and that a lot of that is educating yourself, in my opinion, on the illogical and faulty ways of thinking that humans are always inevitably, unavoidably subject to. And it's just like the machinery that we have and we're working with. And a quote
Yeah.
I always come
Yeah.
back to is Daniel Kahneman is like a foremost expert on this. Literally like Nobel Prize winner and studied illogical thinking. And someone asked him like, how do you avoid, you know, like cognitive distortions or logical fallacies? And he's like, I don't, I can't. It's
Yeah.
yeah, you can't, you cannot. Same with Robert Sapolsky, who's like written about free will and he thinks we don't have it. And it's like, well, then do you just act as though you don't have free will? He's like, no, there's no way you could. I mean, like really, like seriously, uh, you know. So I think there's this idea of like, if you can um, understand the ways we think, how we think, and how that can be wrong, you can say, okay, I can also commit those things. I don't need to identify as someone who feels a certain way or is a certain type of person because of my actions. I can see everything as being somewhat separate enough to be changed, and then you can start to then um, act on changing them, if that makes sense. A lot of that seemed
Yeah.
incoherent because I was actually trying to answer that well from a few different standpoints, but um, it's really hard. It's really,
Yeah.
really
I was going to say, I
hard.
think it's just incredibly difficult
Yeah,
because one of the things you were talking about is like, what resonated with me is teaching somebody you are not this ideal.
sure.
Like
Yeah,
you are not only this belief. And that's really hard for a
yeah,
lot of people
yeah,
to do. And like the work that you would have to do psychologically to begin to decouple that relationship, I think would take quite some time for somebody who's, let's say a zealot in one particular belief or another. One other thing I think that you did, even though it is somewhat emotional, is, and I think it's key, I want to talk about it because I think it's key to coaching, is just practicing empathy, honestly,
yeah,
because
totally. Yeah,
you were talking this more as seeing, being able to perceive and see different ideas and reasons and like detaching emotionally from that
yeah,
and like these are like, these are perspectives. But in a coaching sense, like having the ability to relate and empathize and put ourselves in the shoes of the athletes and the people that we're
Mm.
working with, or maybe even in our colleagues' shoes and how they're seeing things, so that we could reasonably survey their perspective,
Yeah.
you know, a little bit like okay, like almost like acting like, okay, I'm gonna pretend like I'm Josh today, and I'm gonna see things
Yeah.
the way
Yeah. Wow.
Josh experiences them,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, maybe Josh has a point, or maybe doesn't,
Yeah.
but I think that practice that might be a little more rooted rooted in the emotional nature of our beings, but maybe we must, because the machine is faulty, and there is
Yeah.
no way of being like cold and computerized and scientific about it as we would like to be.
So there's like you said a bunch of great shit, way better than I could have. And I've been reading a bunch of Daniel Dennett, and he's a philosopher, and I think he's like hybrid philosopher scientist. And it's so funny, he just shits on introspection. He's like, you can't understand the brain by introspecting, because of
Yeah.
exactly what I just said. And that was Descartes' error. Descartes laid in a bathtub, completely naked, with a candle lit, a glass of wine, and he thought like, I think therefore I am. I figured it out. God's going to support me in all of my understandings of the workings of the mind. Completely wrong. Like, but a lot of that is because he didn't have any external sources to then like communicate his ideas to, and to say like, oh, here's what I'm thinking. Could you support this? Or like, yeah, give me some constructive feedback. So I think being open to my perspective is not the only perspective, and it's not the only right perspective. It's just it's
Yeah.
my experience. What you're saying is like, yeah, maybe take, that experience, which is very attached to our own survival as a person. It's not anyone else's survival. Evolution is a process of reproduction and passing on your lineage. It's not someone else's lineage. It's your own lineage. It's a personal self-identified fitness. And that's why when I talk about like illogical ways of thinking, it requires training and conscious awareness and like
Yes.
deliberation and deliberate action. So I recognize that my experience of the world is one experience, and it's veiled in some like Wizard of Oz-esque thing that I could then learn to not just fall prey to, and I could perspective take and empathize and have all these things that other people can have naturally or don't have naturally, but I can learn to have them because that's what the field of psychology is meant to do. It's meant to teach us about our own psychology and study like the ways that then um, influences other people's experience or influences the world. So um, that is where you talk about empathy and perspective taking and why it's so meaningful. And I think as a coach, that's ultimately what you're trying to do, to then get a grasp on like, how am I being perceived, the work I do as a coach, but also how's the training being taken or how's it being processed. I'm gonna plug
Yes.
myself in, and my computer's dying. So if you want to riff on
Okay.
that, go ahead.
Yeah. No. No problem. I think to bring it home, I guess I think those are really valuable tools as a coach to have, like kind of how you're tying it up. It says we need to be doing that with our athletes, but it's also kind of the same thing for digesting information.
Yeah.
So practice empathy, practice alternative perspectives, be open to this information, uh, and then have, I don't know, sharpen your mind and have critical reasoning and discuss. Don't be Descartes there, alone, and reach out to peers
Yeah.
and other very experienced, shall we say, well recognized consensus thinkers, if you will. I mean, sometimes you need a non-consensus thinker to start a revolution, but
Yeah.
yeah, be able to look outside yourself, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And where are you at now with your coaching journey, I guess? You mean, you give us the TLDR. Like, where is Heavy Metal Barbell? Like, where are you at in your own development? Are you kind of at the point where you're the mentor now?
I'm working a little bit into that. Yeah, so we have several coaches on staff who are in earlier stages of this journey that we talked about, and who you know maybe I would consider only one of them maybe a career track coach, at least in our
Wow.
weightlifting practice here. The others, they're doing it because they enjoy it, which is perfectly fine. We need grassroots coaches. We need coaches who
Yeah.
are just passionate about coaching, and like they to work here, we do have a very high standard. So you must have some understanding of the background knowledge that we discussed. So we do continuing education calls, um, to make sure that they are being challenged and being exposed to these sort of concepts, and that where I'm poking holes into maybe how they're doing things, and poking holes and maybe to how I'm doing things too. Because like one of the worst things I did when I became like a more seasoned coach was like automatically disregard
Yeah.
novice coaches' perspectives. I think that's a huge trap you could fall into. And sometimes, yeah, it's like, yeah, that's dumb, but I think it's really, really important to be open, just as we were talking about all perspectives. And like, I had a coach here who's now that I think profession track kind of coach, and they had a really good point. And I was like, that made me realize, okay, you can't like completely disregard somebody due to their lack of experience, I guess.
Mm.
So that was important learning for me. But yeah, so I'm there, but I've still, I'm in a master's program right now myself, so I'm seeking out um, more knowledge, more information, and doing it in a program that is kind of a little bit outside what my bubble and development has been in. If my
Mm.
bubble and development has been strength and power focused,
Yeah.
and like all of my mentors have been doing that, like obviously in weightlifting, and then even like Joe Ken is what I would consider like my strength conditioning mentor, and he does things a very certain way. Now I'm seeking out information from people doing things in other sports, specifically in this case, like track and field, and
Wow.
just considering, okay, like, and it's led to some really great thoughts and discoveries and practices that I'm already able to test out and implement and see a positive benefit. It's just because I'm being challenged in a way that I wasn't
Yeah.
inside of our sphere,
Yeah.
So I'm still learning. I'm helping coaches, but I will say this: the place that I get the most is being on the floor coaching.
Mm.
Continues to be number one, and I want to hit that home. And Mike Catone will say this too. I'm going to name drop Mike Catone because he's my boss at USA Weightlifting, because he would like, for all of the sports science we get to do in our work, all of the biomechanics analyses we get to do, and nerding out on data and this kind of stuff, like all of that happens during our lives, but we still go into the lab and
Mm.
we still go into the gym, attempt to apply it and attempt to help our athletes with that set of knowledge, and kind of parse through what works and what doesn't work, and what matters and what doesn't matter. Like if you're not a practitioner, I think your practitioners honestly are the tip of the spear. Like they have always been ahead of the science, and it's for a lot of the reasons that you've mentioned, because like it isn't simple to get just a
Yeah.
study done. I
Yeah.
can I can track down this email. I was thinking about it when you were mentioning how difficult it is to get a study. It's to Andy Galpin, before the 2015 Houston Worlds, and I was like, Andy, you got to get there and like get a dartfish and get all the study and like have people jump on plates and all this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, where am I going to get the money to do all that and like get people out there, and thank goodness that we've been able to see studies since then, like the 2017 study for Worlds and Pan Ams on bar
Mm.
path like comes to
Yeah.
mind. Snatch kinematics is like, that's basically what I wanted to have happen, because we hadn't had an update domestically on like weightlifting kinematics in many years. So anyway, back, this is a little tangent. I'm sorry, Josh. Practitioners weren't waiting for that study to occur, I guess is what I'm saying. They were just there doing performance, like taking what knowledge they did have and trying to get the better outcomes for the athletes, whatever it took in the gym to make that happen.
Yeah. No, that was actually super interesting. I loved listening to you talk about um like your mentorship, um how you're mentoring, where the business is. And I know there was a role that opened up. I don't know if you've filled it since, but I shared it on LinkedIn, and so I don't know
Oh yeah,
if that's still something that people could apply to if they're interested. But it seemed like a great opportunity.
thanks. Yeah, like we actually just completed our initial round of interviews.
Oh
So
wow. Okay.
if people do hear this now, don't apply. Only because we've we're basically moving. We had, I want to say, a dozen very
Oh
good
gosh.
candidates. So it
Yeah.
took a really long time to interview everybody like in the initial round. We're now doing our second round, and we're
Wow.
scheduling kind of follow up sessions, because this job, it's a head sports performance role. they're going to be kind of launching our program that I don't have time to do, which is focused on youth athletic development, speed, strength,
Mm,
agility, all those
yeah.
boom, sexy words, injury proof. But really, we're blessed here. Like we have 40 yards of turf out back. We have a laser timing gate system. We have force
Wow.
plates. We have velocity base trackers, and so we have this suite. We think we can really help athletes, not just weightlifters and not just
Yeah.
general fitness people. And we're trying to do that. So we're in our second round to doing that, and hopefully we find the right person from
Yeah.
this pool.
How exciting. How exciting. If people are interested in keeping up with Heavy Metal Barbell and yourself, Sean, where can they go to follow you guys, or just to check out what you have to offer, or anything that's online?
Yeah, they can go heavymetalbarbellclub.com. They can follow us on Instagram at Heavy Metal Barbell Club. You can follow me at Sean M. Rigsby. I'm pretty easy to find. I think those are our basic mediums. We're starting to publish more to our YouTube. If you go to YouTube and look up Heavy Metal Barbell, you'll probably find it. But I haven't got on the TikToks. I don't have time for that. One last rant about being a practitioner. Like if you're not the people you see who are like churning out the most content, are probably not the people
Yeah.
doing the most practicing, if you know
Yeah.
what I mean.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Totally. I wish I did not have to be on a screen as much as I have to be, because
Yeah,
like,
but you're doing it. You're doing the work, man.
yeah.
So like,
No. No.
uh,
Totally.
in
Yeah.
in fact, one giving flowers moment to Josh here. Like, we recently started doing some podcasting here, like in our environment, and like I knew, like, I think 99% of podcasts don't do 10 episodes,
Yeah.
right? And I know how many years you're into it and how many episodes you are in. Like, you've continued to endure. So congratulations, really, on all the. No, I'm serious. Like,
Right.
this is difficult to do,
Yeah.
and to continue to make it interesting
Yeah.
and listenable and fun, and you bring great guests on from a variety of different backgrounds. So, great job, Josh, to do that
Yeah.
while he is continuing to improve himself as a
Yeah.
coach, developing himself and serving athletes. Like,
Yeah.
that is really hard to do, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The one thing and it's funny because I'm gonna go coach for an hour after this. The one thing I find that is like this constant driver is, as you develop something, right? The idea is like you move vertically, and as you move vertically, it's like 300 episodes. It's like, who do you interview, who do you record with? And I had Michael Roberts on, who's like one of the foremost experts in muscle hypertrophy. I was reading a review for a paper I'm writing. There's like 900 citations, and it's about overload and skeletal muscle. It's like, and he's like the guy who spearheaded it, and it's like, all right, that's fucking awesome. Like, it was so cool to talk with him about aging and muscle, and had Jacob Gooden on, had you on, and
Yeah.
it's been fun to be able to continue to one up the last batch of episodes and continue to kind of drive it forward. I actually have a t-shirt that I got made that it's just for fun. It says philosophical weightlifting. There's a Marcus Aurelius quote on the back, and it says something along the lines of like, don't waste time asking what a good person should be, just be one. And it says Marcus
Oh,
Aurelius, and so
that's terrific.
yeah, I'm getting it delivered, and it's been cool to be able to just like slowly chip away and do something that's worth doing. So I really appreciate that. I did tune in on the YouTube because I wanted to check it out. I was like, oh, Sean Rigsby's starting a
Oh,
podcast. Pretty cool. Um,
yeah. I don't know that I'm going to get as far as you, buddy, and definitely not be able to. I don't think ask, like, honestly, these conversations are so valuable. I think it, your range of audience is terrific. Like as you were talking about, like, people along the sphere of development. So you see how much it resonates in, like, the desire to continue to improve yourself. I'm sure
yeah,
there's a little bit of
totally.
self-serving part, like
Yeah.
seeking out knowledge, but um, speak truth into the world and publish for them is
Well,
terrific. So,
and Sean, and I could probably go on. I'm just going to stop after this last thing. That Seb asked me a question once, or that we were posed a question, and it was something along the lines of, CJ Cummings walks into your gym. Do you coach him, or do you pass him on to someone who you feel is a more competent coach? It's like, no, I coach him, and I'm probably going to make a lot of mistakes, but I'm going to develop trying to figure out how to make him a better athlete more.
Mhm.
And maybe he takes a little bit of a hit, hopefully not, but that's the point of me leveling up my game. And that's the idea, right? Is I hope that these conversations and the externalization of, like, This is the way, this is what I believe. This is what I do. This is how I do it. It's like, oh shit, I said that. I have to actually do it now. Right? Like,
Yeah,
oh, I
yeah.
can't hide behind. I've kind of lived my life on that. Is like, if I can put it into the world and I can, if I know it to be true, I'll do my best to do it. Um, and these conversations are a great way to facilitate that. I think they also just get us both thinking deeply, which is what we need. It's what we need in like sports science.
It's
So
my favorite part about doing this is exploring, having these
yeah,
conversations,
need it.
and like just seeing where it goes. Like hopefully people enjoy us riffing, but it's like the reason I want to do it, to be honest. So
Yeah.
selfishly.
And we'll everyone hopefully will tune in for a part two. Um, bring more coffee and
Yeah.
bring your best, most consumptive brain state so you can kind of tune in and pick up everything possible. Sean, thank you again for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. For everyone listening, check me out at Philosophical Weightlifting on the interwebs and everywhere else. If you have any questions, reach out. Otherwise, we will catch you all on another episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting podcast.